Good morning, my beloved things. Welcome back to the Cavern, where we are discussing one of my favorite topics, vampires. Yes, I've seen and read numerous books on the topic from the age of 9 up until now. My obsession has never ended, and I don't think it ever will. I've been asked why I have this fascination with the damned, and all I can say is it's the immortality. I would have loved to have been alive during the Victorian era or the times of ancient Greece or Egypt and saw things of that time period. And to have still been alive today. Because, well, the amount of knowledge and wealth I would have accrued from then to now would be substantial, and I'd be so much better off than I am right now. I would have been able to finish my psychology degree, get my doctorate, and be a psychologist right now. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to keep going, and not a lot you can do without a license to practice psychology, and I can't actually get the license because I don't have the required things, which I say the college failed in that regard. Anyway, we're not getting into that though. Okay, so I also have a love for the dark and the night. I've always had a difficult time sleeping since I was a little kid, and it probably had to do with my night terrors during that time period. Sleep at night never comes easy, and it is a very frustrating time, to say the least. I'd rather be up writing than sleeping. I hate to say it, because usually I just spend hours laying there, and then when I finally fall asleep, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can't get back to sleep, so I run on pretty much 3 to 5 hours a night. I should say a day, if I'm lucky. Sometimes I get more, if I'm really lucky, but I haven't been lately. And then when we change the clocks, it makes it that much worse. I actually don't adjust when we change the clocks forward. I always feel like I'm losing that hour of sleep. I never feel fully rested. I hate it. I wish we would leave it alone and not go forward. I know some people love the extra daylight, but you actually get it anyways if we just left it alone. But people don't get that. But we're not getting into all this. I'm getting on a tangent. Anyways. So, I do have a sun allergy too. I break out in hives when I'm out in the harsh rays of summer. It's partially why I've been called a vampire or vampires, because of all of these things. It was my nickname in high school, although not out of nicety, but out of spite and to be mean. You know how kids are. People don't like how different I was from them. I loved horror movies that were darker than what my female peers enjoyed. I also listened to heavy metal or metalcore or even death metal, which didn't get me bonus points. I did have a lot of friends though, which was kind of surprising, although I had more male friends than female friends. And add in the fact that during my high school years, I started writing my vampire novels, just made things even worse for me. So I took their negative comment and I used it on MySpace back then. I was Queen Vampires on there, and I think I still am. If I actually don't even know. I haven't used it in years. Very, very long time. It's actually a Y on Twitter, for those of you that come from Twitter, why I go by Queen Vampires on there. I'm hoping to find my MySpace friends that I made back then. I miss them so much. They were incredible people. Chobes, Havoc were 2 of my favorites, and of course Bruno, Tyler. I miss them all. Unfortunately, I lost contact with all of them when MySpace died and Facebook took over. But again, I'm getting on a tangent. And I do apologize for all of this. If any of you are interested in reading my vampire novels, they are not published yet. I'm waiting until I share my other works first, so you all get a sense of my writing style. Because I have a very deep connection to my vampire characters. Each one is a part of me. Either we share a similar life struggle, been through some hell and back, or they have similar personality traits or personality traits that I wish I had. So, without further ado, are vampires real? I watched a special a long time ago on the History Channel which delved into that very question. They interviewed a few individuals who believe they are, in fact, vampires. And I actually bought a few of their books. One of which is Michelle Bullinger and Konstantinos. I actually have a few books by Michelle and a couple by Konstantinos. And yes, I've read them quite a bit because I'm using some of their information for my vampires. More realistic, in my opinion. Jonathan Weiss, a folklorist, historian, and founder of the Jonathan Weiss Tours in New Orleans, explained that vampires being real is possible. According to Weiss, vampires exist in different forms in different cultures and countries. However, the concept of blood-sucking creatures has been around for centuries. If you strip down the folklore and just come up with a standard set of facts, vampires very well could be real, Weiss said. The idea of vampire-like creatures feasting on human blood has been around for a very long time and gained a foothold in Eastern Europe, according to Joseph Laycock, a professor of religious studies at Texas State University. Which actually makes sense because there was the vampire hunters back then. They actually did have vampire hunting tools, and they went through great lengths to ensure that the dead wouldn't rise. So, yeah, it has been around for a long time. While vampire folklore isn't new, the word vampire actually is. It first appeared in the 1700s, 1700s. However, the term was used to describe price-gouging merchants rather than blood-sucking monsters. In 1819, vampires became mainstream when John William Polidori wrote The Vampire, which is spelled with a Y instead of an I. A fictional story taken from the story of Lord Byron. It was the first of its kind to make vampires aristocratic and seductive. Nearly 80 years later, Bram Stoker published Dracula, which many believe is based on Vlad the Impaler, but I actually read an article that finds it may not be the case because there's a lot of discrepancies between the two. So I don't know. Regardless, Stoker's Count Dracula is a far cry from Byron's sexy, womanizing vampire. The modern-day vampire that most of us relate to actually comes from the 1931 film Dracula starring Bela Lugosi, which is one of my personal favorites. And that film is actually based on a play, not the Bram Stoker story. So, with how prominent vampires are in our culture, you would think that they might actually have some type of fact behind them, because most myths do lie in fact. Well, if you consider people who drink the blood of others for pleasure as vampires, then yeah, they exist. In 2015, a survey was conducted by the Atlanta Vampire Alliance, and they found there are at least 5,000 people in the United States that identify as real vampires. Now, that's kind of a drop in the bucket if you look at how many people live in the United States. We have 333 million people in this country. So 5,000 is really nothing. Although many people with blood fetishes typically call themselves sanguines, others identify as vampires and, like the fictional creatures, avoid sunlight and drink human blood from donors. They don't actually drink from blood bags. Like the Vampire Diaries, even though I love that show. There is another type of vampires as well, and I'm sure you probably have heard of it because of the show What We Do in the Shadows. Psychic vampires, which feed in a completely different way. They steal the energy off the living, we stated. Some people just don't create an energy that people normally make themselves. As a result, they take it from other people to feel complete. This is what Michelle Bullinger believes. She thinks she is a psychic vampire. And when I watched the documentary, it honestly made sense. I liked how she explained it. It made a lot more sense to me than the sanguine side. And there was a scientist that was trying to prove psychic vampirism on the show. I'm going to try and look it up. So if any of you want to watch it, it probably is on YouTube somewhere. Vampirism seems to be worldwide. There are different forms, of course, because there's different cultures and different countries. Science, on the other hand, has pointed to porphyria, a blood disorder that causes severe blisters on the skin that is exposed to sunlight. It's a disease that may have been linked to the vampire legend. Other symptoms of porphyria can be temporarily relieved by ingesting blood. Other diseases have been blamed for promoting vampirism, which include rabies and goiters, which I don't quite know how those were blamed for promoting vampirism. I would have to look into those. Modern science has silenced vampire fears, but it doesn't stop people from believing that they themselves are vampires. According to John Edgar Browning, a researcher of vampires, found that symptoms of vampirism start to manifest around puberty, when those who later become reliant on ingesting blood find themselves physically drained for no discernible reason. They usually discover accidentally that blood offers a remedy. They might bite their lip, for instance, and realize that swallowing the metallic liquid between their teeth gives them an instant burst of energy. The vampires that Browning spoke to claimed they couldn't control their urge, which amounts to a need for around 2 or 3 feedings a week. Williams, a scientist at Idaho State University, conducted research on how vampire stigma has affected the quality of the individual's healthcare. In his studies, he found no evidence of psychiatric issues in self-identified vampires. So, are vampires real? There's no scientific information to prove or disprove vampirism. I find it interesting and fascinating because no, they don't live forever like the myth states, but it's interesting for someone to feel they are a vampire. I've never once felt I was a vampire. I've had people cause me to pause about the possibility because of my insomnia and sun allergy. Some believe I am a vampire because of those things. I have actually been told this many times. Back when I was on MySpace, I was told this, and I was actually told this recently. Actually, not really recently, but I would say a couple years ago on Twitter from some people. It's an argument I've honestly had because I don't feel like I am, and maybe that's because of society. We deem what is normal and what isn't, and the problem with normal is it's subjective. Some feel that being a vegetarian isn't normal, or enjoying horror movies isn't normal. So what is normal? I was viewed as not normal because of my taste in music, horror movies, and my interests. I was also deemed not normal because of the speculation about my sexuality, which happens to a lot of people. Trans individuals constantly are berated because society deems they are not normal. Non-binary, again, society deems they are not normal, but they are. So what is normal? What are your thoughts? Do you think vampires exist? Is it all a myth? I think vampires will always remain a mystery for many of us, and I'm very curious still about psychic vampirism because, like I said, it's the one that seems the most plausible to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'll leave a few links below for those of you who would wish to know more about this topic and from the perspective of self-proclaimed vampires. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care until next time, where I will be discussing more vampire lore, because why the hell not? I'm on a roll and I have tons of information on the topic, so if any of you are curious, stay tuned for what's to come, because I have no idea where I'm going to go with this, because I could talk about various myths around the world, which I did start doing last year. I might continue with that. But you'll have to wait and see. Thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care and stay tuned for Friday. I don't know what movie I'm going to be reviewing, so it's going to be all one big mystery. I might disclose it on Twitter. I know I don't really disclose stuff on Twitter, and I think it's because I'm pretty spontaneous. Sometimes I just come up with things and I go, all right, let's talk about this. So I apologize for those that want to kind of know ahead of time what's going on before it happens, but that's my channel. What do you want? Who I am. Thank you again. I hope you all have a great week. Take care until next time. Bye, everyone.